We are live, I believe. I'm going to give it a minute and hit the live button on Rockfin as well and make sure that we're live on all of our platforms. And Merry Christmas, everyone. Merry Christmas Eve. I'm a big fan of Christmas miracles. I've always been a big fan of those. I think most people are. And it seems as though that we might have a Christmas miracle of sorts this year. And to join us to talk about it today, I'm Brad Binkley, by the way. This is Propaganda Report, Drive Time at News Blast. I just want to prepare you. There's probably a 100% chance that some dogs are going to start barking like crazy at some point during this broadcast. So just to give you a heads up on that, I'm kind of a makeshift studio here. But joining us is Garland Favorito of VoterGA. Garland, it's been a while since I got to talk to you. How you doing?
Doing great, Binkley. It's great to be back with you. It's been a while. And I just thrilled that we could get a chance to do this and share our Christmas news with you.
Well, why don't we go ahead and do that? So tell me what happened.
Well, it is quite a story. I guess I should back up and start in the beginning. We were basically when we did this so many times, we talked about this on the show with you and Monica about how we were trying to get access to the Fulton County ballots because we had 4 sworn affidavits that there were counterfeit ballots in the actual count, the Fulton County's results, and the affidavits were made by senior poll managers who had detected these during the audit. So we simply filed a lawsuit to say that stuffing the ballot box with counterfeit ballots is a violation of our equal protection and due process rights under the United States and Georgia constitutions. The judge, and you probably remember a lot of this story, the judge basically kind of agreed with us, and we went through several months getting basically different wins. We got the ballot images. We got a protective order on the physical ballots. We beat back a motion to dismiss. And we were finally got the order to inspect the ballots at the temporary conditional order. And just before we were getting ready to do that, Fulton County went out and hired criminal defense attorneys to prevent us from looking at the ballots. What does that tell you?
So, I think it tells you a lot.
Yeah. So the judge then suddenly turned around and he claimed that we didn't have standing. And this was a bizarre, absolutely bizarre ruling because he cherry picked an 11th Circuit federal ruling that violated all of the United States Supreme Court precedents. That was the Linwood case. And since we were in state court under state law with state constitution, it didn't apply anyway. And even if it did, it would have violated all the precedents in the history of the state of Georgia since its inception in 1788. So it was an absurd thing. I kept saying after that, we have standing. We really do have standing, and we were going to appeal. And we did appeal. We appealed to the Georgia Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals we cited all of the case precedents in the United States Supreme Court history and in Georgia history. We had over a dozen precedents showing that voters always have standing to sue officials that violate the law.
Standing is just, most people know, but just you have a stake in it basically. As a citizen, you're harmed by what they do.
Exactly. In fact, what the Supreme Court said was a community stakeholder was the exact term that they used. But the Court of Appeals just upheld the lower court decision and never ruled on a single one of our case precedents. Not one did they even talk about or consider. They just blew us off as though we were pieces of dirt. And then, so we took it to the Georgia Supreme Court, and the Georgia Supreme Court issued this rule in our favor. And it was kind of interesting the way this came about. Our attorney for a whole year had been saying, this was Todd Harding, who did the brief that won the case. Todd has been saying, you need to watch this other case called the Sons of Confederate Veterans case. And because they're suing for exactly the same thing. And we did. So the
Was that a monument case? Is that what that was?
Exactly. They were suing for illegal removal of Confederate monuments because in Georgia, all monuments are protected by state law, regardless of whether you like them or not. You cannot remove them unless you change the law. So, and that applies to all monuments, not just Confederate monuments. So that's the general statute. And the same judge, Judge Amero, claimed that they did not have standing either. It's really absurd. So about a month ago, the Supreme Court issued a ruling on that case. And they said exactly what you just said. Citizens, residents, and taxpayers are community stakeholders, and therefore they have the right to sue government officials who violate the law or government agencies. And they said they've always had this right.
It's quite absurd to think otherwise, that the citizens of a country would not have a stake in the integrity of an election and the votes. It's crazy. I remember when you were telling us about that, everything was kind of rolling smoothly until they were trying all these different ways to railroad you, and then they pulled out this lack of standing thing.
Yeah, it was bizarre, and you're absolutely right. Particularly in America, how would you not have standing to sue government officials or agencies who violate the law? So it was crazy. So they made the decision, but what was interesting about that decision a month ago was they said, we extend this ruling to voters because voters are community stakeholders as well, just like citizens, residents, and taxpayers.
Yeah.
All of our plaintiffs are citizens, residents, taxpayers, and voters. They qualify on any one of the four, if not all of them. So we knew a month ago we were going to get this ruling that was favorable. But what happened was it came on the morning of our Christmas party, and that was really exciting. And that's when we kind of rolled up some scrolls and sent it out. Of course, you've been there at Brimstone before to do one of them, and we sent that scroll out. Gave 75 copies of them to everybody that was there. We had about 75 people there, and then we got them to all open it at the same time because a lot of the folks that were there had not heard the news yet. And then we celebrated by popping confetti at the tables, and we had our big confetti popper, and we just had a grand old time that night. It was an amazing night.
I'm sure you did some dancing, because I recall you dance from time to time.
We did, actually. We got in one of a little swing song to Aviva's 15 Hugs. Aviva was performing as usual there, and we did a little disco number and some other stuff. And then Tamara, we got married about 4 or 5 months ago, about 5 now.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thanks. Yeah, it's a real blessing for both of us. And so Ricardo and Tamara and the group planned a surprise for me, and Ricardo and Aviva sung the Rise Up song by Kane, which was one of our theme song that we use a lot. So that was amazing. The crowd got up and we're all cheering, Rise Up, Rise Up. And Ted Metz, another one of your friends, videoed this. So we'll probably have a highlight film on this before long. So it was quite an evening. And then Tamara did a really special little tribute because I had been at this for 20 years. So it was a 20-year anniversary. And what a great Christmas present we got that night. It was fantastic.
It is. I mean, you stuck with it despite the fact that they came after you guys. They tried to do everything possible to try and prevent you guys from moving forward. I remember I used to pull up articles where they were just making things up about you. I'd read the claim, and you would tell me, no, I never even talked to that publication. So congratulations on making that happen. Kilthor says, congrats, Garland. And What are the implications of this now? What are you guys going to be able to do now that you have that standing moving forward?
Yeah, great question. That's the question that everybody wants to know. But one thing before we get there, I don't know if you have that Christmas card. Can you show that?
I do. Yeah, I can pull that up.
I'll kind of lead into that, your question there, as to what's next. But I thought the folks might get a kick out of this. We have it up on our website at voterga.org homepage. And so y'all can
there it is.
see this. Yeah. This is our Christmas card to all. And this has the order in it. And this is the case, the Favorito v. Juan. There's also a second case that's going back to the court as well, to the lower courts. But here's one more thing that's interesting about this. Explains that the judge, our cert was granted, writ of cert was granted. The judgment is vacated, which was the original judgment, and then the case is remanded back to the Court of Appeals. So the next step, to get to your question, is that the Court of Appeals will have to be forced to remand it back to the Judge Amaro, because they are obligated to go with the Supreme Court decision. But one more thing that's interesting about this is that the Supreme Court ruled on this unanimously.
Oh, wow.
There was no question ever in their minds that we had standing. And
there shouldn't have been either. It's frustrating because we've heard for so long, for the past couple of years, that the 2020 election has been tried in court. It's however many times there's been lawsuits filed, and most of them were thrown out in procedural process, not actual content of it, like yours. I wonder if we're going to be hearing any news reports in the mainstream media saying, well, we were wrong about some of these, and there is standing. I kind of highly doubt they're going to be paying a lot of time to it.
Right. I have not gotten one call from traditional news media. We call it the Mockingbird media.
It is. It's totally the Mockingbird media.
Yeah, in reference to the CIA's Operation Mockingbird, where they found 200 media assets, CIA media assets.
Yeah, so it's out in the open now. It's just like open Mockingbird.
Yeah, exactly. So, I haven't got one call about this yet from, like an AJC or GPP or anything like that. I just think it's kind of human.
I wouldn't expect much from the AJC, especially the way they've been leaning their coverage the past couple of years.
Right. Well, we didn't. We don't. They have basically. Well, they actually claimed that the case was dismissed once when it wasn't, and then other organizations like the Washington Post picked up their story, and we had to call up the Post and tell them it was a lie and they needed to retract it. So, anyway, so the case is going back to the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals will kick it back all the way to the Superior Court. And then there will be no more excuses that I can think of that the judge can make before he opens discovery.
Yeah, that was my next question. There's no wild card out there because they're always scheming and planning to find some sort of way to railroad things, and there's just nothing you guys can think of that they have left in their back pocket.
No, this was the last straw. I mean, literally, Judge Amaro was grasping for straws when he cherry-picked this 11th Circuit ruling. And I'm being a little bold here because I have to go back into his court, and he's still going to be the judge in the case. But, I mean, look, the truth is the truth. We have had standing all along, and that's just a fact. And so, there's nothing else they can do. They're going to have to show us the ballots, and I think that he will be a different judge now that he's been overturned twice by the Georgia Supreme Court, because he was also the judge in the Sons of Confederate Veterans case.
And that also takes it out of his hands. So if there's no more legal things he can do to railroad it, then anybody's putting pressure on him, he can say, I've done everything you guys asked me to. I can't do anything anymore. So that might take some pressure off of him as well. We have a question from Keelthor. So the case, and I think you just spoke to that, about inspecting the ballots. It's no longer dead in the water, and you do believe that you will get to inspect is it in Fulton County?
Yeah, exactly. It's in Fulton County. And see, the case was actually never dead in the water. We had appealed it. And I have been saying for over a year that we will win this appeal because we have standing. People didn't believe me. Even our friends some of the guys on the radio who were considered to be conservative didn't believe me. So, and I don't completely fault them but once you understand the Constitution and the laws of the state, particularly election laws, it's obvious that it was just a corrupt ruling. And we can't necessarily take judges' rulings as though they actually know what they're doing and they're making honest judicial decisions. In this case, this was a political decision because the judge didn't want to handle the case, and it was just too much of a hot potato.
Right, and there's been some time and some distance that's come to it now. Which is that why you think it was able to go through at this point in time? That it was obviously the right choice, but now that we're already basically in the 2024 primary campaign season, this just never-ending campaigns,
right,
that they felt a little more comfortable to allow that to go through.
Well, yes and no. Yeah, I that's an interesting point. I would have thought that the Court of Appeals would have made this decision. I didn't. I understand that the judge felt there was too much of a political hot potato, and he's only one judge. But when we took it to the Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeals should have made the decision that the Georgia Supreme Court made. And it's quite fascinating as to why they didn't. Ironically, the justice who probably wrote the decision for the Court of Appeals was immediately promoted to the Georgia Supreme Court by Governor Brian Kemp. And then he was the one, if you saw that order that you just showed, he was disqualified because he had already ruled in the Court of Appeals. And all of the other justices were unanimous. And I suspect he would have been unanimous as well had they allowed him to rule on it, even though he probably wrote the opinion on the lower court case.
Yeah, no, it's great when you're the judges who are supposed to be non-political are throwing political footballs away and then promoting people for doing so, for avoiding actually addressing things that need to be addressed. And we've seen Governor Brian Kemp, and I just thought this was hilarious, since he did not run on the campaign of the 2020 election. He didn't align himself with Trump when he ran for governor. He is now being floated and interviewed by CNN, MSNBC as he is potentially a challenger to Trump in 2024. Brian Kemp as a presidential candidate. That's comedy, in my opinion.
Well, if it was between Brian Kemp and Trump in Georgia, Kemp could not even win Georgia.
No, I don't think so either.
No.
A guy who's declaring a national holiday or a state holiday for Georgia Bulldog national championships, I don't know if he's going to be able to. I'm just a Tech fan. That's why I always go. I know Georgia's very good. But so what kind of impact could this have on past elections and future elections? That's some questions I'm seeing being asked. I'm wondering the same. Is what if you guys are able to inspect those ballots and you are able to show that the election had some potentially problems that would have changed the outcome?
Well, the first thing, even before we get there, Binkley, the first thing is that it's going to have an impact even if we found out that there were no counterfeit ballots. Now, personally, I know that there are counterfeit ballots. We just don't know how many. But this is the impact of the decision that we finally put the standing issue to bed in Georgia is huge for future elections. And it has national implications because a lot of times, cases that were settled by the Supreme Court in another state are used as precedents in the states. They're not required to be used, but a lot of times they have some weight, and particularly when the Supreme Court was so logical in their conclusion.
Yeah, if you present a precedent case and it lines up very well with the case that you're presenting in your state, then you can use that oftentimes as an argument that will be accepted.
Yeah, exactly. The judge does not have an obligation, but I think it's a very powerful decision.
It puts pressure on them. It gives people who are trying to pursue similar goals. It gives them something to say. Okay, we're not the only ones here, and then you hope that can continue to spread around. I also want to get your thoughts at some point on the 2022 midterms and Kerry Lake and all of that. I know you were doing a lot of work in that area.
Well, of course, we did go to Arizona. We watched the audit, the original 2020 audit, and we have made some contacts and we have we have folks in Arizona right now that we're talking to a lot on that. But I have been so swamped with this. We've got 5 active cases right now in Georgia, and I have been so swamped with litigation that I haven't been able to keep up with with Carrie. I do know that Heather Honey, who's a great investigator out of Pennsylvania, testified for her the other day, and she's quite a brilliant person. I consider her a good friend. And she's very helpful, and will help us on our cases as well. But I don't think anybody will ever be able to convince me that Carrie Lake did not win Arizona.
Yeah, I was a little surprised as well with that outcome, and I haven't investigated. I know that she's challenging. I think she's challenging it, and I don't know enough about it either. But Keelthorpe brings up a good question here. So the ballots, if you're able to inspect them, are they still there? Have they been threaded?
It's a good question. We have put multiple motions to preserve these ballots into multiple courts. We asked Judge Amero to reinstate the order to preserve before this case was decided. He claimed he did not have jurisdiction because since it was at the Court of Appeals. We filed for the motion at the Court of Appeals to preserve it. They said Judge Amero has that authority. So we went back to Judge Amero to get that preservation on. He has not ruled on it yet. But now we're again going to force the issue again in light of the Georgia Supreme Court decision. So
it would seem they would always want to preserve them. It would be suspicious to me if they weren't preserved, especially in this case.
Well, exactly. And so in November, which was last month, the time is up for where they could be destroyed. It's a 24-month window. According to state law. Federal law is 22 months. And then, but there's a process that you have to go through, taking the ballots for the grand jury, getting grand jury approval. So that would not have happened, couldn't have happened until this month anyway. So it's not likely that anything has been done with the ballots yet. So we should be able to preserve these, although the Supreme Court cut it pretty close. As did the Court of Appeals.
It's just crazy that there's a time limit for that. To me, it's just like, well, you preserve them for a little while, but then we're setting them on fire, and you don't have to see them again. And is there a timeline that you're looking at for being able to get your hands on this?
Well, it's hard to say, Binkley. So we'll go back. Realistically, the judge should just go ahead and open discovery without another hearing. We're anticipating that we'll probably have another hearing. We'll be prepared for that. We were prepared to have a hearing last time before we were interrupted.
Yeah, right.
So it's hard to predict exactly what we are going to, what's going to happen, because we're pretty much in uncharted territory.
Yeah, you're setting precedents.
Yeah, with the Supreme Court overriding two lower courts here. So. It's hard to say exactly how it will play out, but we should have access to the ballots. The question is whether there's going to be a hearing or not first.
Well, I got to say, you're a model in persistence. You have kept this up since the 2020 election, and we used to do the weekly shows where you'd update us, and you have kept at it, and I think you have shown that you can fight back with the powers that be. And I know it's still a battle, and you're still going to be pushing forward, and hopefully we will get to see those ballots. And Bob has a question here. Bob, he says, what will you do if the ballots are destroyed? If that does turn out to be the case, what would be the next move then?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One thing before even we get there is that what was interesting in the very last hearing that we had, the Secretary of State's office claimed that they had looked at the ballots and there were no counterfeit ballots in one batch that they looked at. Very ironic, because if what they said is true, they tampered with the ballots and violated Georgia state law. So it's really, really fascinating. I think they just made up the whole story. I think they just were flat lying through their teeth personally. But they actually claimed that in court. And of course, the media picked right up on it. Very, very funny. But what would we do if the ballots were destroyed? We'd have to find out the circumstances behind that, but I think that would be absolutely criminal.
You would think so, and you would think that would make people kind of take a step back if they were exposed to that information. They don't always get exposed to information like that because the media suppresses stuff. But it's exciting to know that it's still ongoing. So when we hear them say it's been litigated, there's nothing, they're wrong. There's actually still forward movement going, and I'm happy for you. I'm happy that your hard work has paid off for you and everybody over there at VoterGA. You have a few videos that you linked.
Oh yeah, I thought you might get a kick out of this one. We put a little story together, Binkley, that I thought you'd get a kick out. It's a 2-minute little Christmas story that.
I'll pop that up on screen here.
Yeah, it tells the whole story. It goes to the. 'Twas the night before Christmas.
While we're playing this, if you guys in the chats on Rockfin, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, well, I can't see Twitter, but if you guys have any questions you want to ask, then feel free to put them in there, and we'll see what Garland has to say. Get this up on screen. There we go. You look great in your Santa hat there.
Yeah, I got it back onto that. Well, just for you.
All right. It's loading up there. I'm still figuring out Rumble a little bit. I have the stream going there as well. And all this different technology podcasters have to learn. I'm happy we have Rumble, though. I'm actually a little surprised the stream hasn't been kicked off of YouTube. Usually my streams get kicked from YouTube.
Yeah, well, we've had a lot of difficulty with YouTube. That's why we're going to Rumble.
All right, here we go.
A Christmas story from VoterGA. 'Twas 5 days before Christmas, when all through the land, Georgians were waiting to see where they stand. Our standing had been hung by a judgment unfair. We hoped the Supreme Court soon would be there. When what to our wondering eyes should appear but this short, important letter we now hold so dear. As I removed the ribbon and unrolled the scroll, imagine the happiness that entered this old soul. My eyes had a twinkle when I finished my read. Our standing had been recognized. It felt wonderful to succeed. We'll return to the lower court with our standing intact. The judge shall be instructed to abide by that fact. So great joy to our team who work for truth and light. A Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. December 20th, 2022, the Honorable Supreme Court met pursuant to adjournment. The following order was passed. Garland Favorito et al. V. Alex Wong et al. The petition for cert is granted. The judgment is vacated and the case is remanded to the Court of Appeals for reconsideration in light of Sons of Confederate Veterans v. Henry County Board of Commissioners. The petitioner's motion to expedite consideration of the petition for cert is dismissed as moved. All the justices concur in the Georgia Supreme Court, except Justice Pinson, who was disqualified for ruling against us in the Georgia Court of Appeals. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
That's fantastic. I love it. I love how you guys at VoterGA, you do a lot of different ways to convey information. through songs. I know Viva's written a song, and she's sung it to at the Georgia General Assembly, I think. And it's just a lot of ways to get that information to stick so people can get interested in it. There's a question over here. And by the way, I don't know who wrote that, but fantastic job. You might have a future in writing children's types books, and it's great.
Yes. That's one of our individuals who likes to remain secret.
Yeah. So Choir Boy on Rockfin says that I haven't heard much about how to improve transparency in the election. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. What a wonderful question. That is our number one top priority. And what we believe has to happen, and almost happened in the last session, is that we need to make ballots public record. Once ballots are public record, then you can detect if there are counterfeit ballots, and you can verify the voting system results that right now are completely unverifiable, as the elections directors are just certifying whatever the machine tells them. So that is a great point. Now, we almost got that passed in the last session, but that was blocked on sine die at the last minute when we were 1 minute away from a final vote for passage. Governor Jeff Duncan blocked that. And we believe probably either under the orders of Brian Kemp or the Central Intelligence Agency.
Which everybody knows. I mean, I think people watching this show have known for a long time that they just get their hands in like absolutely everything, and the FBI and CIA controlling all the social media platforms. It's basically been revealed that there was an operation to interfere in the election on Twitter and I think Facebook also. And
yes,
it's media just doesn't really care about all that.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've acknowledged it. Both Facebook and Twitter, Zuckerberg and I think Elon Musk released some documents, and they showed that the FBI was complicit in attempting to rig the 2020 election.
Right. Yeah, and that seems very clear. I mean, almost spelled out through the Twitter files. Keel Thor, going back to the Confederate monument, he says, so the Confederate monument case was unrelated to the ballot case, but the ballot case is moving again to a ruling on the monument case?
There were, yeah, I'm glad he asked me to clarify that. There were two rulings. The first one was the ruling on the Confederate monument case. And they ruled that those people, those individuals who sued do have standing to sue the government officials for trying to illegally remove Confederate monuments. So that was the first ruling about a month ago. We knew that we had won then when that ruling came out. Our ruling, we had to wait about another month for. Our ruling just came out Tuesday of this week. Oh, I think it was Tuesday. Yeah. So, so there were two cases and two separate rulings, both overturning the same judge in the lower court in Henry County.
All right, got another question here. We're talking about will you be able to maintain the secrecy of individual ballots? This is from Troy. If you make the ballots available to the public.
Absolutely. This is one of the things that the false information that keeps coming out from the Fulton County attorneys. The attorney argued in court twice that, we can't make ballots public record because that would give away voter information. Well, there is no voter information on a ballot. There has never been any voter information on a ballot, and there's not likely to ever be any voter information on a ballot. The Fulton County attorney made up this lie and told it twice in the court, and that even the judge was not buying that one. So, answer to the question is absolutely. There will be no violations of anyone's secrecy because there's no way to know who voted the ballot. It's impossible to find out, and because the envelopes have been separated from the ballots, and there's no voter information on a ballot.
Yeah, and that for some reason that reminded me of when we used to do these on a weekly basis. We would have that one person who come in and just try and derail everything and just shout whatever, like I was like flattered by. I was like, oh, we have our own person who's trying to target us and derail. Not saying that question, that's a great question, But I remember, I can't remember that person's name though. It was our own troll, and you always handled it very well.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that question came up because it's
Yeah.
important for everyone to know that there's no problem. So I appreciate that question.
Choir Boy says, but we do need a name or transparency goes out the window. So kind of arguing the counterpoint there of, and I personally, I don't think there's anything I don't think full 100% transparency really exists for kind of the reason that he brings up there is if we don't have the names on, then it's not full transparency. If we do, this is an invasion of people's privacy. So that's
Yeah, so the names are on the envelopes. So once the envelope, you've got the envelope and we know who voted the ballot, but once the ballot is separated from the envelope, then you no longer know who voted the ballot. So that's how they verify who voted and whether they were qualified for voting in the beginning. And then once they're qualified, the ballot is separated from the envelope, and then that is a valid vote.
Right. I can see in a twisted dystopia where they say, you want transparency, we'll give you that full transparency, almost like everybody has to raise their hand and show their face and name when they vote, so they can use intimidation tactics and practices, which I know there was a lot of talk of possibly something happening leading up to the midterms when it comes to vote watchers. I know you guys had a lot of people. I think you had a lot of people that were doing vote watching work, and the people that I talked to were all just trying to do like a great job and go by the book because they knew there was a lot of pressure on you guys.
Yeah, exactly. We did have a lot of people who were poll watchers, poll workers, and that sort of thing. But in regards to transparency, the transparency we're talking about is transparency of the election results, and there needs to be transparency of the back office processes and how these mail-in ballots are processed. So the entire back office process should be transparent to the voter, and the count should be transparent to the voter.
All right. Keel Thor says, is there a barcode on the ballots that connects them to signed envelopes, or is that part of the tear off at the top? Or is he thinking about something else entirely?
Yeah, so the QR code does not connect the voter to the ballot. The QR code in Georgia has the votes in it, which we believe is unverifiable, and the United States District Court has already said is illegal, according to Georgia law. So but there's no tie back to the voter. The voter information is not in that QR code. However, that's a really interesting point, though, because we can't prove what's in the QR code because it's proprietary. And it's encoded so that we as voters cannot determine what really is in the QR code. But it's not encrypted, so hackers can encrypt and hack the code, but we can't see what's in it. So as far as I know, there's no tie back to the voter. But again, we don't know that for a fact because it's a proprietary system. It's secret, and we should never have secretly counted elections in Georgia or any other state.
Right, and it's when you have Brad Raffensperger as the Secretary of State, which is awful, then that is definitely a concern. A question on Rockfin here. So if you do get to examine the ballots, does that mean there could be a recount in Fulton County?
If we get to examine the ballots, then the next step would be to determine what we're after is how many counterfeit ballots are in that count. That's what we really want to know, among other things. We've already found a lot of more information ever since we filed the original lawsuit. So what we want to see is how many counterfeit ballots are. Now then, when we go from there, once we make that determination, once we get access to the ballots, we'll be able to count them. We can count them with ballot image software.
Wouldn't that just be nuts if you get the ballots, it pushes forward, you guys end up counting, doing a recount, and we get closer and closer to 2024 only to find that, well, it actually would have been a different outcome in 2020, and the investigation of it got stretched out. That I don't know. I'd certainly be interested to see how Trump would react to that. Well, what are your thoughts on his candidacy moving forward? I know that there's people who are on DeSantis' side and Trump, and maybe there's like one or two people that like Brian Kemp. I don't know.
Well, we're trying to stay out of the political end of the whole thing and just just try to make sure that we have an honest election. So, I mean, technically we would not have,
you don't endorse candidates is what you're saying.
Yeah, right. We don't endorse candidates, and we don't have necessarily a dog in the hunt. But I do believe that Donald Trump was cheated out of the state of Georgia in 2020. And I have said many times before that in certain races, dating all the way back to 2002, I believe that certain Democrats were cheated out of offices as well.
Yeah, and that's what I tell people all the time is when I first met you, when we interviewed you on WSB, you were there because you were looking into, I think it was the John Ossoff, Karen Handel special election, and you thought that John Ossoff had that election stolen from him. So I think that's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, it is correct. We were never able to get enough evidence to prove it because the ballots were secret at that time and the vote counts were secret. But there were a lot of strange anomalies that were never explained, and we did do 2 reports on both the general election and the runoff for that.
Yes, I tell people that story to tell them that you're not a right winger, which I think because you've just been doing what you've done for the past 20 years, and then it happened to be when Trump ran for president and associated with Trump, you just get probably considered a right winger, alt-right or whatever they call it now, and it's not the case. You've been doing this for a long time for both sides of the aisle. I haven't got to ask you about, you published some findings or I saw some tweets you put out about Herschel Walker.
Yeah, so the United States Senate race in the general election, it's interesting that you brought this up, but at 10 o'clock, on election night, Herschel Walker's vote totals decreased by 20,000 votes, and at the same time, Raphael Warnock's votes increased by 4,000, and Chase Oliver's votes, the Libertarian candidate, went up by 300. So that's a technical impossibility. And I have asked the state election director to please explain this because no one has been able to explain it. It was reported on Georgia Public Broadcasting. It was also, we have the screenshots. If you go to our press release on the VoterGA.org press release tab, you can see the actual GPB screenshots from 10:01 to 10:03, something to that effect. I think it was 9:59 to 10:02. But where Walker's votes went from 1,551,000 to 1,529,000. That's not possible, particularly when you consider that the other candidates' votes are going up. It's just no explanation. So I took this to the state election director for Georgia. I said, can you explain this to me? Here's the GPB shots. We know the same thing was reported on WSB. We have 2 sworn affidavits, which are published in our press release there on VoterGA.org press release tab. And we confirmed it with the Edison Media line feed. They all show a 20,000 vote drop for Herschel Walker. I said, can you explain that to me? And he says, yes, I'll get back with you tomorrow on this. Well, that was a week ago, and needless to say, I've heard not a word from the state election director of the state of Georgia. And you would think they would be interested in 20,000 votes that just fell out of nowhere, and very, very, very strange. In the runoff, we also had a really strange situation where that election was decided on the very first drop, which we call the interim results push. Counties push up results all night long, and on the very first drop, Raphael Warnock got 186,000 votes to Herschel Walker's 47,000 votes. That very first interim results push decided the election. Nothing else mattered the rest of the night after that push because that was 140 or 50,000 vote difference, and the margin of victory, I think, was less than 100,000.
Yeah, that whole midterm season was just a little wild, especially with I have like thousands of text messages I feel from Herschel Walker, from Warnock. It's like a spam box at that point. And you had Fetterman versus Oz, which was a weird situation. It's like chaos, man. And I wonder if it's going to continue to get more chaotic moving forward towards 2024, or if perhaps maybe what you're doing can have, I think somebody was asking earlier, will it have a chilling effect on what they're doing in the future elections? Maybe things might start to stabilize. I don't know. The future will tell us, I guess. But you have another video here, another Christmas-related video. Do you want to share that?
Oh, sure. So
Yeah.
I'll just set this one up for you. So this is a 5-minute video, and we did a parody on the 12 Days of Christmas last year. Aviva produced this. And it's based on real evidence that we uncovered during the year, and we decided to put it all together in a video for you. And I think that all the listeners will kick out of it.
All right, let's get that rolling here. Might take a second to load up, like the last time. Here we go. All right, Garland, while that's loading up, thanks for being here. If you guys have any final questions, put them in the chats, and I'll try to get to them. Is everything else going well?
Yeah, it's going really well. We've got 5 active lawsuits. I can tell you about after this.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
On the first month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the second month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me 2 million lost ballot images.
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the third month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me 300 unsaved drop boxes. 2 million lost ballot images.
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the fourth month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me
4 fire whistleblowers.
300 unsaved drop boxes. 2 million lost ballot images.
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the fifth month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me
5,000 duplicate scans. 4 fire whistleblowers.
300 unsaved drop boxes. 2 million lost ballot images.
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On 6 months of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me
60% on air.
5,000 duplicate scans.
4 fire whistleblowers.
300 unsaved drop boxes. 2 million lost ballot images.
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the 7th month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me 70 cameras flash their election files.
60% on air.
5,000 duplicate scans.
4 fire whistleblowers.
300 unsaved drop boxes. 2 million lost ballot images.
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the 8th month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me 850 false tally Biden votes. 70,000 trash their election files.
60% on air. 5,000 duplicate scans. 4 fire whistleblowers.
300 unsaved drop boxes. 2 million lost ballot images.
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the 9th month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me
A 9-page jumped up court brief.
850 false tally Biden votes. 70,000 trash their election files.
60% on air. 5,000 duplicate scans. 4 fire whistleblowers.
300 unsaved drop boxes. 2 million lost ballot images.
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the 9th month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me 10 million bucks raising annually.
Jumped up court brief.
850 false tally Biden votes. 70,000 trash their election files.
60% on air. 5,000 duplicate scans. 4 fire whistleblowers.
300 unsaved drop boxes. 2 million lost
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the 11th month of cover-ups of a big bad wolf eat me. 11,000 suspect ballots, 10 million bucks wasted annually.
Page trumped up corporate.
850 false tally by the dozens of counties, election files.
60% on the air rate.
5,000 duplicate stamps. 4 or 5 whistleblowers.
300 unsafe drop
2
boxes.
million lost ballot images.
And a voting system that poops on Georgia law.
On the 12th month of cover-ups, the big bad wolf gave me 12 months of cover-ups, 11,000 ballots,
10 million bucks wasted annually. Page trumped up corporate.
800 false tally by the dozens of counties,
60% on the air rate.
5,000 duplicate scans. 4 or 5 whistleblowers.
300 unsafe drop boxes.
Million lost ballot images.
And the voting system that moves on Georgia law.
Oh, there's the dog. That's good. That's great. I have to say, I mean, everybody was impressive, but the dog on cue howling, fantastic work. That was-
Well,
and
I
I love Street Thug Garland.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. The timing into doing that. I think Aviva probably did a little editing there to get that dog to do that right on cue. So
Well, it sounded great, and I make some sketches sometimes too. So I love doing that to expose some of this stuff. Stella says gold. That was great. And over here we have Choir Boy says thank you, Garland. Great work. And on screen for Bob Wildfish, you mentioned the dogs earlier. You said you had to show the dog if it barks, and I am showing the barking dog on screen right now. Here's Edmund. You can see him on screen. He's a very handsome young man. He's a maniac, but very handsome. So, Garland, do you have any parting words?
Well, the inspection is going to generate a lot of expense for us because we know some of our money we were holding in reserve for inspection. We went ahead and filed some other cases which are just absolutely egregious. We have other, we've got right now we have an active lawsuit to ban the Dominion system in the state of Georgia. That's on appeal at the Georgia Court of Appeals. We believe that one's going to be overturned. We've got the lawsuit to when Brad Ravensburger has outsourced voter registration database illegally to third parties. We think that's a clear-cut case as well. We've got an election challenge against Secretary of State Brad Ravensburger. That's still outstanding, even though it was the primary. That was the primary, Republican primary with Jody Heiss and others. He miraculously won that with 51% of the vote.
Right. Or what I like to say, most likely CIA spook Brad Raffensperger.
Yeah, and so we've got there's 4 or 5 cases. And our latest one we just filed was for the destruction of the original ballot images in violation of both federal and state law. We picked out 3 of the most egregious counties, sued them. Really, all of them should be sued. We're trying to get the state election board right now to change their rules so that they conform with federal and state law. They don't. So all of that takes money, but we're going to keep fighting. We're going to pursue all those cases and the inspections of the ballots all at the same time. So, folks, we do need support, and we are 501c3, tax-deductible donations because we're nonpartisan. And most importantly, I'm a volunteer. I don't take any salary out of VoterGA, and all of us are volunteers. And we just want to save Georgia and do the right thing.
And that's VoterGA, the voterga.org. Is that the website?
That is it. It's voterga.org. Binkley, I'm so grateful to be back with you. It's been quite a while.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. There's one more question that popped in. If you want to,
Sure.
If you have a thought on that, it says, can Arizona file against Maricopa for using a third party to count votes?
It would depend on Arizona law. Very good question, but Arizona, I'm not familiar enough with Arizona law to answer that question.
Yeah. Well, and a final comment here from Troy, speaking about your new wife. I guess we will call her the First Lady of Voter Integrity.
I think she would appreciate that.
All right,
Yeah.
Garland.
We're,
So
we're
yeah,
blessed. We both feel really blessed.
that's awesome. And you're at VoterGA on Twitter, correct?
That's right. You can find us at VoterGA or hashtag VoterGA on almost any social media platform. And that's all thanks to our wonderful volunteers who are willing to spend their own time just to keep this cause going.
Yeah, fantastic. And what Garland and VoterGA does, it takes a lot of resources, and you can tell all the people who have all the millions and millions of dollars from the billionaires funding them. They have these slick, fancy websites, and they're just raking in money all the time. You can tell the people that are bootstrapping and putting in the hard work, and you guys have certainly been doing that a long time. So if you have a little bit to spare, send it Garland's way to help them continue to push forward with this fight. Thank you guys for watching in the comments. Fantastic chats and questions. And Garland, it's good to see you again. It's been a little while. I appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas.
You too, Binkley. Give my regards to Monica when you see her. I haven't talked to her in a while, and this was a great show. I know our social media people are going to absolutely love it.
Yeah, there's a lot. People are loving the the Christmas that we did. They great work. They're appreciating it. They love the dog. They love everybody's characters. I think it's awesome. I don't think I saw that last year. I'm impressed. I'm inspired now. I want to go make something.
That was all Aviva from Aviva Penguin. She produced that or directed it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Garland. Thank you guys, and we'll talk to you next time. Have a fantastic rest of your day.